As she passes by a flower seller, Isabel Anderson, a millionaire, is paralyzed upon seeing a brooch, the same one her deceased mother used to wear 18 years ago. Isabel Anderson, a 65-year-old businesswoman, encounters a young seller wearing a brooch identical to the one her late mother used to own. Driven by curiosity, Isabel embarks on an investigation that unearths deep family secrets, hidden letters, and a mysterious key. With the help of an unexpected ally, she uncovers an emotional and revealing plot. Isabel Anderson, a wealthy and successful 65-year-old woman, was walking through the central park of her city, absorbed in her thoughts. Her life had been marked by great business achievements but also by deep losses, especially the death of her mother, Mrs. Margaret, 18 years ago. One of the few objects she still had from her mother was a valuable brooch, which mysteriously disappeared shortly after her death. That day, something unusual caught her attention. As she passed by a flower stand, her eyes were drawn to a young seller wearing a brooch identical to the one her mother had. Isabel stopped immediately, feeling her heart race and memories flood her mind. "How is this possible?" she murmured to herself, perplexed. The brooch was a unique piece, custom-made, that her mother always wore on special occasions. Isabel felt a mixture of surprise and disbelief. She approached the young man, who seemed unaware of her presence. "Excuse me, young man," she said, her voice firm but laden with emotion. "That brooch you're wearing, where did you get it?" The young man, surprised by the direct approach, looked at Isabel with large, curious eyes. He appeared to be in his early 20s, with a gentle and slightly tired expression. "Oh, the brooch," he responded, touching the piece on his chest. "It belongs to my grandmother. She gave it to me to wear on my first day of work here, saying it would bring me luck." Isabel felt a chill down her spine. Could it be just a coincidence? Or was that brooch really the same one her mother wore? "I need to speak with your grandmother," Isabel declared, her voice leaving no room for objections. "That brooch belonged to my mother. I need to understand how it got to you." The young man, sensing the seriousness in Isabel's voice, nodded slowly. "Sure, ma'am. My grandmother is at home. I can take you there." Isabel hesitated for a moment, but her curiosity and need for answers were stronger. She decided to follow the young man. On the way to his house, Isabel observed the city with a distant look, remembering the moments she spent with her mother. Mrs. Margaret was a strong and loving woman who had always been by her daughter's side. The disappearance of the brooch had been a hard blow, a loss Isabel had never fully overcome. As they walked, the young man began to talk more about his grandmother. "My grandmother, Maria, always told me many stories about her life and how she started working very young. She always speaks fondly of the family she worked for many years." Isabel felt a mix of emotions. "And how did she end up with the brooch?" "She never told me the full story, ma'am. Just that it was something very special to her, and that she wanted me to have a bit of that luck in my work," he replied. When they arrived at a small, simple house, the young man opened the door and called for his grandmother. A frail-looking elderly woman, with white hair and eyes full of wisdom, appeared in the room. "Grandma, this lady wants to talk to you about the brooch you gave me," explained the young man. The grandmother looked at Isabel with a mixture of surprise and recognition. "Isabel Anderson?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Isabel was even more surprised. "Yes, it's me. And you are?" "I am Maria. I worked at your mother's house many years ago. She trusted me a lot," replied the elderly woman, her eyes brimming with tears. Maria's revelation brought a wave of memories to Isabel's mind. She vaguely remembered a maid named Maria, who had always been present during her childhood and adolescence. But how did that brooch end up in Maria's hands? "Maria, I need to know how this brooch, which belonged to my mother, ended up with you," Isabel insisted, her voice filled with emotion. Maria sighed deeply and invited Isabel to sit down. It's a long story, Isabel. And perhaps not everything is as you imagine. Isabel settled in, anxious to hear the explanation that could finally solve the mystery that had haunted her for so many years. Isabel sat in the armchair in the small living room, her gaze fixed on Maria. The young flower seller, who introduced himself as Luke, stood by his grandmother's side, holding her hand lovingly. "Maria, please tell me how my mother's brooch ended up in your hands," Isabel asked, her voice firm but betraying the pain and confusion she felt. Maria took a deep breath and began to speak. "Isabel, your mother, Mrs. Margaret, always trusted me. I worked in your house for many years and witnessed many important moments in your life. One day, shortly after her death, I found the brooch on the garden floor. I believe it fell when she was tending to the flowers, which she loved to do." Isabel frowned. "But why didn't you return it to me? I searched for it for weeks, desperate to find something that connected me to her. I knew how much that brooch meant to you, Isabel," Maria said, her eyes full of regret. "But I was afraid that no one would believe me if I said I found it. At that time, there were many tensions in the house, and I feared being accused of theft. I decided to keep it, planning to return it when the situation calmed down, but that moment never came." Isabel felt a mix of anger and sadness. "You should have trusted me, Maria. I would never have doubted you." Maria nodded, tears running down her face. "I know, Isabel, and I deeply regret not doing so. When my health began to deteriorate, I decided to give the brooch to Luke. He is all I have in the world now, and I wanted him to have something valuable and meaningful." Luke, who had been listening attentively, intervened. "Ms. Isabel, my grandmother told me about the brooch and its story. I never imagined it would cause so much pain. If I had known, I would have looked for you immediately." Isabel looked at Luke, seeing sincerity in his eyes. "I believe you, Luke, but this situation is much more complicated than it seems." The tension in the room was palpable. Isabel was torn between the anger at what she considered a betrayal and the compassion for Maria, who clearly regretted what she had done. "I will need some time to process all this," Isabel finally said. "But I want to understand better what happened at that time. I will investigate further. I need to know if there is more that I don't know." Maria nodded, understanding. "I will tell you everything I know, Isabel. There are no more secrets." In the following days, Isabel immersed herself in a deep investigation into her family's past and Maria's connection to her mother. She revisited old documents, talked to former employees and family friends, trying to piece together a puzzle that seemed increasingly complex. During her investigation, Isabel discovered that Maria was more than just a maid. She was a trusted friend and confidant for Mrs. Margaret. There were letters and notes exchanged between the two that showed a relationship of deep trust and friendship. One day, Isabel found a letter her mother wrote shortly before her death. In it, Mrs. Margaret mentioned her gratitude to Maria and expressed her desire for Isabel to take good care of her, should anything happen. The discovery shook Isabel. She realized that her mother trusted Maria fully and probably never imagined that the maid could have any malicious intent. With this new information, Isabel decided to confront Maria again, this time with a different perspective. "Maria, I found a letter from my mother," Isabel began when she returned to Luke's house. "She trusted you more than I imagined. I'm beginning to understand that what happened wasn't out of malice." Maria nodded, tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Margaret was a wonderful woman, Isabel. I would never do anything to harm her or you." Isabel sighed, feeling the weight of the past. "I need more answers, Maria. I want to understand everything, including the relationship between you and my mother. Maybe that way I can finally find peace." Maria looked at Isabel with a relieved expression. "I will tell you everything I know, Isabel. It's time for all the secrets to be revealed." The following days were marked by regular meetings between Isabel and Maria. With each conversation, more details about the past were revealed, painting a complex picture of the relationships and events that involved the Anderson family. "My mother trusted you a lot, Maria," Isabel began, sitting in the small kitchen of Luke's house. "But how did this develop? You were just a maid when you started working there." Maria sighed, looking at the steaming tea in her hands. "I started as a maid, yes, but your mother always treated me with respect and dignity. She saw in me a friend, someone she could trust. Over time, our relationship evolved. I was her confidant, someone she could share her worries and joys with." Isabel nodded slowly, absorbing Maria's words. "And what about the brooch? Is there anything else I should know about it?" Maria hesitated before answering. "The brooch wasn't just a piece of jewelry for your mother. It had deep sentimental value. It was a gift from your father before he passed away. That brooch carried memories of love and commitment." Isabel felt a lump in her throat hearing this. "My mother never mentioned this to me. She was a reserved woman, Isabel. Many things she kept to herself, perhaps to protect you," Maria explained. Meanwhile, Luke, who had been listening in silence, decided to intervene. "Ms. Isabel, if I may, I can help with the investigation. I know some places where we can look for more information, people who might know more about the past." Isabel looked at the young man with gratitude. "Thank you, Luke. Your help will be valuable. We need to fully understand what happened." The two began working together, visiting old archives, talking to former family friends, and revisiting places that were important to Mrs. Margaret. In one of these places, an old antique shop, they found an old family friend, Mr. Henry. "Isabel, it's been a long time. Your mother and I were great friends," said Henry, an elderly man with bright eyes and an impressive memory. "Mr. Henry, I'm trying to learn more about a brooch that belonged to my mother. Do you know anything about it?" Isabel asked. Henry thought for a moment before responding. "Oh yes, the brooch. Your mother told me about it once. She said there was something special hidden in it, but she never gave me details." This information intrigued Isabel. "Something special? What could it be?" "I don't know, my dear, but maybe there's more than meets the eye. Your mother was a woman full of secrets, always careful with her things," replied Henry with an enigmatic smile. This revelation further increased Isabel's curiosity. Back at Maria's house, Isabel decided to investigate the brooch more closely. With Maria's permission, she took the piece in her hands, examining every detail. It was then that she noticed something she had never seen before: a small, almost imperceptible opening on the back of the brooch. Carefully, she managed to open a secret compartment. Inside, she found a small piece of aged paper and a tiny key. "Maria, did you know about this?" Isabel asked, showing the secret compartment. Maria shook her head, surprised.
"No, Isabel.
"I had no idea." Isabel unrolled the paper carefully. It was a small hand-drawn map indicating a specific location on the old Anderson family property. And the key, Isabel concluded, must open something important at that location. "This is becoming more mysterious than I imagined," Isabel murmured, feeling the adrenaline rise. Luke, observing attentively, suggested, "We need to go to the property and find out what this map and key reveal." Isabel agreed. "Yes, but we need to be prepared. We don't know what we will find." The next day, Isabel, Luke, and Maria went to the old Anderson family property. The place was abandoned but still held the majesty of past times. Following the map, they reached an old safe hidden in the basement. With the key in hand, Isabel unlocked the safe. Inside, they found a collection of letters and objects that belonged to her mother, revealing family secrets and forgotten stories. Isabel took one of the letters, her heart pounding. "Let's see what my mother left for us," she said, feeling she was about to discover something that would change everything. Isabel, Luke, and Maria sat around the safe, their breaths held as Isabel carefully opened the first letter. Mrs. Margaret's handwriting filled the pages, each word laden with emotion and meaning. "Dear Isabel," If you are reading this letter, it means you have discovered the brooch's secret. There is much you need to know about our family and about me. I always wanted to tell you everything, but never found the right moment. Perhaps because I knew some truths could be painful. Isabel paused for a moment, feeling a lump form in her throat. She continued reading, her voice trembling. The brooch contains more than just memories. It holds the map and key to the safe, where some of my deepest confidences are kept. And, above all, a will that will change everything you knew about our inheritance. Luke and Maria looked at Isabel with anticipation and concern. Isabel took a deep breath and took the will from the bottom of the safe. As she opened the document, her eyes widened as she read the first lines. "This will revoke all previous ones," Isabel read aloud. "I, Margaret Anderson, leave the majority of my estate to charities and a significant amount to Maria Silva, my dear friend and confidant, who was always by my side in the most difficult times." Isabel paused, feeling a whirlwind of emotions. Maria, sitting beside her, looked shocked and emotional at the same time. "But there is more," Isabel continued, her voice choked. "I also leave an amount to Isabel, my beloved daughter, with the hope that she will continue my charitable work and help those in need, just as I always tried to do." The silence in the room was palpable. Isabel closed her eyes, feeling the depth of her mother's words. She had never imagined the inheritance would be distributed this way, especially involving Maria so significantly. "Isabel, I didn't know any of this," Maria said, tears in her eyes. "Your mother never mentioned this will to me." "I believe you, Maria," Isabel replied, holding the former maid's hand. "My mother trusted you a lot, and now it's up to us to honor her wishes." Luke, who had been quiet until then, spoke with a firm voice. "We need to ensure the will is fulfilled, and maybe there are more things we haven't discovered yet."
Isabel nodded.
"You're right, Luke. Let's review all the letters and documents. My mother left this for us for a reason." In the following days, Isabel, Luke, and Maria spent hours reading and analyzing every letter, every document found in the safe. The letters revealed a series of family secrets, from hidden relationships to important financial decisions that shaped the Anderson family's history. One of the most revealing letters was written a few days before Mrs. Margaret's death. In it, she expressed her desire to help the needy, and how Maria was an inspiration for that decision. "Maria always showed a kindness and dedication that deeply touched me. I want Isabel to continue this legacy and find in Maria the same friendship and support I found." Reading these words brought tears to Isabel's eyes. She realized she had been blinded by the pain of loss and the resentment she had harbored for so long. Another shocking revelation emerged: a letter mentioning the existence of a hidden chest on the property, containing even older documents and objects, which could reveal more secrets about the Anderson family. The letter indicated that the key found in the brooch opened this chest. Determined to follow all the clues left by her mother, Isabel, Luke, and Maria began to search for the chest. After hours of searching, they found it hidden under a loose floorboard in the attic. Isabel, with the key in hand, carefully opened the chest. Inside, they found a true treasure trove of historical documents, photographs, and personal items from past generations of the Anderson family. But the most important item was a second will, even more detailed than the first, explicitly describing Mrs. Margaret's intentions regarding her inheritance and the reasons behind each decision. "This second will clarifies my mother's intentions even more," Isabel said, looking at Luke and Maria. "She wanted to ensure that everyone was taken care of and that our family's legacy was used for good." With all the pieces finally falling into place, Isabel felt a peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. She knew her mother was guiding them somehow, ensuring that love and kindness prevailed. The discovery of the second will brought new clarity to Isabel, Luke, and Maria. As they reviewed the documents and objects in the chest, each piece of the puzzle seemed to fit, revealing a more complete and complex picture of the Anderson family's legacy. Isabel sat in the old living room of the property, holding one of her mother's letters. Luke and Maria were by her side, each immersed in their own reflections. "My mother was always a woman of secrets," Isabel began, her voice soft. "But I never imagined she kept so many." Maria nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "Mrs. Margaret was an extraordinary woman. I always knew there was much more to her than she showed." Luke, who had read several letters, looked up and met Isabel's gaze. "These letters and documents are not just about the inheritance. They reveal a story of love, sacrifice, and commitment to the well-being of others. Your mother was a true philanthropist, Isabel." Isabel smiled, feeling a mix of pride and longing. "Yes, she was, and now it's up to us to continue her work." As they leafed through more documents, Isabel found a letter that touched her deeply. It was a letter from her mother to Maria, written shortly before her death. "Dear Maria, I know that Isabel will find this letter one day. I want you to know that I always trusted you and appreciated your friendship. My wish is that you and Isabel can continue my work, helping those in need and keeping alive the flame of kindness in our hearts." Maria read the letter with tears streaming down her face. "Mrs. Margaret always had a generous heart. It's an honor to know she trusted me so much." Isabel held Maria's hand. "We will do this together, Maria. We will honor her memory and ensure her legacy lives on." With renewed determination, Isabel, Luke, and Maria began planning how they would fulfill Mrs. Margaret's wishes. They decided to create a foundation in her name, dedicated to helping those in need and supporting various charitable institutions. In the following months, Isabel and Luke worked tirelessly to establish the foundation. Maria, despite her frail health, actively participated in discussions and decisions, sharing her wisdom and experience. During this process, Isabel and Luke developed a strong bond. Their partnership evolved into a deep friendship and eventually into something more. Luke brought youthful energy and a fresh perspective to Isabel's life, while she offered him guidance and support. "You are like a son to me, Luke," Isabel said one day, as they reviewed the foundation's plans. "My mother would be proud of you." Luke smiled, touched by Isabel's words. "And I am grateful to have found you. Together, we are doing something truly meaningful." The final revelation came when Maria, in a moment of sincerity, decided to share a secret she had kept for many years. She called Isabel and Luke for a private conversation. "There is something else I need to tell you," Maria began, her voice trembling. "Something I have never revealed to anyone." Isabel and Luke looked at her attentively, sensing the seriousness of her words. "When I found the brooch, I also found something else. A small diary of your mother, Isabel. In it, she wrote about her dreams, fears, and hopes. She described how she wished for you to find love and happiness, and how she wanted your life to be full of purpose." Isabel was silent for a moment, absorbing the information. "Do you still have this diary, Maria?" Maria nodded. "Yes, I kept it with great care, waiting for the right moment to give it to you." With trembling hands, Maria handed the small diary to Isabel. As she opened the first page, Isabel immediately recognized her mother's handwriting. "Dear Isabel, if you are reading this, it means you have finally found what I hid for you. This diary contains my most intimate thoughts, my dreams for you and for our family. I hope it brings you comfort and guides you on your journey." Isabel felt a wave of emotions as she leafed through the pages. Every word was a reminder of the deep love her mother had for her. With the diary in hand, Isabel felt more connected to her mother than ever. She decided to share the contents with Luke and Maria, knowing that her mother's words would guide them as well. In the following months, the foundation began to take shape, with projects being launched and partnerships being formed. Isabel, Luke, and Maria worked tirelessly, united by the common desire to honor Mrs. Margaret's legacy. With the foundation established and thriving, Isabel, Luke, and Maria felt they were fulfilling Mrs. Margaret's legacy. The foundation supported various causes, from orphanages to nursing homes, as well as educational programs for underprivileged youth. The entire city began to see the fruits of the Anderson family's altruistic work, now continued by Isabel and her new allies. One day, Isabel decided to organize a grand opening ceremony for the foundation, inviting all the beneficiaries, partners, and family friends. The ceremony would be a celebration not only of the recent achievements but also of Mrs. Margaret's memory and everything she represented. The night of the event arrived, and the hall was filled with people, all eager to pay their respects and witness the foundation's positive impact. Isabel stepped onto the stage to give a speech, her heart full of emotion. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice firm. "Today we are here to celebrate not only the official opening of the Margaret Anderson Foundation, but also the spirit of kindness and generosity that my mother, Mrs. Margaret, always embodied." She paused, observing the audience, many of whom were moved. "My mother believed that true wealth lies in helping others and doing good. It is an honor to continue her work, alongside such dedicated people as Luke and Maria." Luke, standing next to the stage, smiled at Isabel, feeling proud of the work they had accomplished together. Maria, sitting in the front row, wiped away tears, moved to see Mrs. Margaret's legacy thrive. Isabel continued, "This event marks the beginning of a new chapter for all of us. A chapter where kindness, compassion, and dedication to others are our guides. And I promise that we will continue to work tirelessly to make a difference in as many lives as possible." Applause filled the hall, and Isabel felt a wave of satisfaction. The journey had been long and full of challenges, but she finally felt she was truly honoring her mother's memory. After the speech, Isabel descended from the stage and was immediately surrounded by friends and supporters, all wanting to express their gratitude and admiration. Among them was Luke, who hugged her warmly. "You were amazing, Isabel," he said with a sincere smile. "Your mother would be very proud of you." "Thank you, Luke," Isabel responded emotionally. "And thank you for being by my side every step of this journey. I couldn't have done it without you." Maria also approached, her eyes shining with happiness. "Isabel, you fulfilled your mother's wish in a way she could never have imagined. I am very proud of you." Isabel smiled, feeling at peace. "Maria, your friendship and support were crucial. This is our legacy." In the following months, the foundation continued to grow and positively impact many people's lives. Isabel and Luke developed an even stronger partnership, combining their skills and passions to expand the foundation's reach. They visited various projects and ensured that each initiative was aligned with Mrs. Margaret's values. Maria, despite her frail health, remained involved, offering advice and guidance whenever needed. Her presence was a constant reminder of what the foundation represented and the unwavering love Mrs. Margaret had for those around her. A year after the foundation's inauguration, Isabel and Luke decided to organize an event in Maria's honor, recognizing her dedication and invaluable contribution. The ceremony was emotional, with many of the foundation's beneficiaries expressing their gratitude. At the end of the event, Maria made a brief speech, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "I am deeply honored to be part of this journey. Mrs. Margaret will always be remembered for her kindness and generosity, and I see her spirit in each of you. Thank you, Isabel and Luke, for making this possible." The ceremony was a powerful reminder of the lasting impact one person can have, and how love and compassion can transform lives. Isabel felt a deep gratitude for having found people like Luke and Maria, who shared her vision and passion. As time passed, the foundation continued to thrive, spreading hope and support throughout the city and beyond. Isabel and Luke, now partners in life and work, dedicated themselves to ensuring that Mrs. Margaret's legacy lived on in every action and project. And so, with the foundation solidly established and a dedicated team to continue the work, Isabel found a new peace and purpose. She knew her mother would be proud of what they had accomplished and, more importantly, that Mrs. Margaret's love and values would continue to inspire and guide many future generations.